Thank you for tuning in to the Sonar Summit. My name is Harry Wang, Chief Growth Officer at Sonar. It's my great pleasure to introduce you to my honorable guest, Luis Bitencourt-Emilio. Luis is the Senior Vice President of the Copilot agent at GitHub, a trustee of the Wikimedia Foundation, and above all, a lifelong builder who started programming at the age of 8, with a career spanning Microsoft, Reddit, Rapid, Loft, leading high-growth engineering, product, and data organizations. With that, Luis, welcome to the Sonar Summit.
Thank you, Harry. It's awesome to be here. Looking forward to talking to you and hearing how the summit goes as well.
Likewise. Luis, a lot has really changed since the day you first started programming in the software development in our industry. The silicons, the computers, of course, the network and the language and the framework, and above all, the tools that developers are using every day. As a builder yourself, how do you feel about the latest wave of change that's driven by AI? What's different this time?
Yeah, well, I feel incredible. You mentioned earlier, and I was 8 years old when I started programming. I still got a picture with some really old computers back then. And it was just night and day. But there's also been these different eras, right? Like there was the pre-internet and the post-internet eras. And just, technology, computers was just an entirely different thing. Then there was mobile devices, right? Like when all of a sudden everything was the palm of your hands.
Yeah.
Then at least in my career, and I know this doesn't go not everyone got as much exposure there, but in my career there was also the first AI age, right? Like the pre-AI winters of the phase. That's when I got my LinkedIn handle, artificial intelligence, which like today is a huge commodity. Back then, there wasn't actually a lot of folks interested or working in the space. I did neural networks at college and worked nights and weekends to create a model that, maybe with a 40% accuracy could classify a picture of a trash can. So, barely even an academic exercise at the time. And I think the reason, or one of the big things why it's different now is it's gone from this, science fair, tech exploration, research project, academia to the mainstream. And it did so immensely fast, faster than it took for the internet to pick up, faster than it took for mobile phones to get as ubiquitous as they are today. You saw when just a few years ago, there's the era before and after ChatGPT. Right. And how if you spoke about artificial intelligence at the dinner table at Thanksgiving dinners or wherever you might be, there's a small subset of people that would engage in a conversation with you. Now, you could be on the subway, you could be on a bus, and there's people that will start talking to you.
Conversations. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
So I think that's the big difference. It's ubiquitous in our lives. It's very early. There's a long way to go. It is not, the sci-fi movies that we've watched. It's far from there yet. But I think it's becoming really clear that not only is this a new era, but it's potentially the biggest change we're going to be facing, the biggest change in the era as a human race that we're going to be facing in our generations.
Yeah, I certainly, for one, enjoyed now I can have a conversation with my parents who are not in tech and really about the AI and what I do for work, right? That's great. So I was actually writing in my cheat sheet about a question asking you, how do you feel about Copilot? What are the changes of Copilot in the last 12 months? But actually, in the interest of the pace of actually what we're seeing through, I'm going to change the question to say, how about 3 months? What are the big changes that's happening in Copilot, in GitHub in the last 3 months?
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on. A week is a lifetime, a month is a lifetime. If you remember if I remember my Christmas conversations or New Year's conversations, it's different than the ones that I'm having now. Copilot actually started in the GitHub side 2 years ago, so it's been around for a while, but also gone through an immense amount of change and evolution. And in the past 3 months, I think the biggest thing and one that I've been very closely involved with has been the GitHub Copilot CLI. Right? So we've seen this resurgence of TUIs, of text-based user interfaces, of CLIs in programming and development. And it's actually been really interesting because I remember vividly in the first computers I had in Brasilia in my parents' laundry room, because computers back then were these utilitarian machines. They're not things that they're outside of the house almost. And I remember the moment my brother and I would sit running everything that we figured, we learned that games were things with .exes. This was an MS-DOS. They were anything with .exes. So we just sit there going through every single directory, cd to that, do a dir, and try to go and run every single executable. And I remember when I ran win32.exe, I was like, wait, like now there's like, it's not a game, but it's like this thing, and it's like I can point and click, and it has a games folder. Great, that's what I want. So I still remember kind of this difference into going from the text interface to UI, and then never, I assumed, never going back. And now we're back to the text interfaces, and the power that you're able to have. You get this close to the battlefield on driving machines, technology, cloud interfaces, API, now MCP servers. Everything that you can actually touch through that text interface, through LLMs and different large language models. That has been incredible. We've got every major model, every state-of-the-art model there, so I can switch between 5.3 codecs. I can go into 4.6 Opus. I can get 4.6 Sonnet. I can use both different models at the same time to solve challenges that I'm after. So that's really been in the past 3 months the biggest change. Has been the technical preview there, and I believe actually by the time this comes out, even the next stage of that of the GitHub Copilot CLI.
Yeah, it feels very much like a Back to the Future. Oh, you were Back to the Future sitting in that laundry room. Wonderful. It's interesting you brought up a codex, and when people talk about CLI, I think it will be a miss that we don't talk about cloud CLI. The last year, you and I talked about Agent HQ, and just a few weeks ago, I saw Cloud and Codex went live as an option in Agent HQ in Copilot. That was really interesting. And as someone leading a Copilot agent, how do you feel? Do you have a mixed feelings about seeing a competing agent alongside your own that's on the same platform and at the disposal of your users?
Yeah, no, I mean, I love it. Our goal, what we're going after, is being the platform. Right? Like we believe fundamentally in developer choice. We want to be where developers are. We want to give them the tools that they need. GitHub didn't come around to sell Copilot. Like that's not our mission. Right? Like we started in the social coding mission. We've been around for a long time, helping developers do collaborate with each other. And now we're adding to that persona. Like we don't want to just be the place where developers come together to collaborate on software development. We want to be the place where developers and agents come together to collaborate. And who am I to say like you should only, thou shalt only use this model that I created? Like if there are great models that other folks have created, I want you to be able to get to those. I want our models also to be on that arena and to compete, head to head, and to give that choice for developers to be able to. And yet, sometimes I want to use some of these first party or Copilot models. Sometimes I'm going to use an OpenAI model or Claude, maybe a Google model in some of our products. Maybe different third parties as well. And I think the beauty of that is no one can really tell the future. Are we in the world where 10 years from now, there will be one model to rule them all, or there are going to be a million models, right? Like, is it going to be as different as humans are, as personalities, or is it going to be just one thing that is just hyper, intelligence and runs everything? And without knowing that, like the strategy is, look, we should give people what they want, what they can use. We should let them develop taste, let them try it, see what they're good at, what they're not good at, see how they can actually make each other better. Right? Like some of the best loops we have today is pairing up different model families, model categories and trainers to actually co-work and build things together. So I don't see, I love competition. So, I want to be in the same playing field, and I'd love to be the one that's building that playing field, bringing those people, those communities together, those companies together, and helping us all compete for what we're really striving for, which is the advancement of the advancement of human progress, right? Like we want to do that through software development.
Yeah. As someone living in the ecosystem, Sonar is a part of the ecosystem, GitHub ecosystem. I have you to thank too. Really embrace the open nature and meeting where the users are, meeting where the customers are. I also personally, I have a Copilot and CLI to thank to. As someone who hasn't coded for real for a decade, I now can pretend I can code. I can actually code. So that's wonderful technology advancement. Now I want to maybe turn attention to the audience of this group, which is mostly building production grade enterprise software. And what do you see at GitHub on the adoption of AI, the adoption of a Copilot among your enterprise user base?
Yeah, so I've been very pleasantly surprised. So I joined GitHub almost half a year ago now, and then just by chance, it felt like conference season. I think it was like 4 or 5 conferences in Q4 of last year, and in all of these, we take advantage of them to set up EBCs, right? Like these executive briefing centers, where I meet with companies and execs at companies around anything that they want to talk about on the GitHub Sins. No surprise, a lot of them were around AI. And what I was really pleasantly surprised with is all of them were basically coming with asks for help on 2 things. One of them is, training. How do we train our employees, our users, our people on this new technology to be effective with it? And the other one is metrics. How do I measure ROI? How do I measure that they're being effective on it? Like, how do I know like the return on the investments that I'm putting forth on these technologies? And they're both challenging questions, but it shows me that we're thinking about the right things. Like there was not a single EBC I've had to this day. I probably had about 30 plus, let's say a few dozen there. Not a single one did not ask about those 2 things. There's usually other questions, they vary. Those 2 ubiquitous in every one of them. And that means to me that like they're actually looking at it from the right perspective, not just of like, hey, like I just want to turn this on and let it go. Like, no, I want to figure out how do I train my people to get to use it really well, and how do I measure that it's going well? And that kind of creates this feedback loop that if you're sitting there in that cycle with training, execution, measurement, you've created the scientific experiment of the scientific method for improving your companies and for rolling out technology. So I've been seeing very positive things in that sense. GitHub obviously cares deeply about enterprises, about governance, control, about giving the right throttles and knobs for companies to be able to choose, okay, these models I'm okay with, these I'm not, these features I'm ready to adopt, these I'm not yet, or here's the controls of cost or centers that are going to be able to go and use these technologies or not because they've done the training or that I'm measuring that. So that's a really big area for us. We have entire teams and organizations around enterprise controls and systems there. A big part of Agent HQ that you mentioned is the control pane. Like, how do I know which models, which agents am I running? How do I control them? And how do I have the same security and governance that we required on top of them? So that side of it has been going really well, but it is also very nascent, right? Mm-hmm. There's been out of those few dozen EBCs, I can count on one hand folks that I'm like, oh, wow, okay, you're actually very far ahead in the curve. Now you're thinking about how do you customize these agents, custom agents, running them, in parallel. How are you running fleets? Even like CLI ones, for example, haven't been that many of them yet. So a lot of folks think you're approaching it from the right perspective, and they're all open to it. There's not a lot of hesitation on learning and getting deep diving into these things, but also very early across the board on many of these companies.
Yeah. The learning and the training part also resonate a lot amongst, many things that you just actually mentioned. I was engaging McKinsey in the thought leadership sharing conversations. One of the things I felt refreshing from their perspective is really the organizational aspect, the changing aspect, the people aspect among when the society goes through these changes are often overlooked, right? So that's something certainly I, for one, don't tend to think about that aspect, which is really important, and they come across in our enterprise conversation as well. Now, at Sonar, we are fundamentally in the business of verifying, providing quality assurance and the verification in the building of the software. We hear a lot from our customers. Verifying AI code has really become a challenge as they start adopting more and more AI in their software process. It's so much so it's becoming an inhibitor for them to unlock more value from AI. Every time I hear that, I just want to hug them and say, hey, actually, here's the easy button with the SonarQube logo printed on it. But obviously, that's not as simple as that. So joke aside, what do you think about that challenge? And then what is Copilot and GitHub? How are you embracing that challenge?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a huge shift in this tech and with models, generating code. Whereas before, software development was basically gated by how fast we could type, right? Like, I remember, the amount of times that I'm sitting there with my wrist hurting because I've been on a long coding session and I didn't take breaks. That's no longer the case. You can type parallel, in many different machines, almost at infinite speeds or way faster than you can read. And if you can now generate code faster than you can read it, then it completely changes things. I'm like, okay, wait, certainly if I can generate it faster than I can read it, then I can generate it faster than I can test it. And then now my bottleneck becomes testing, not generation, right? Whereas before you could read written code way faster than you could type it. Now that's just completely upended. And testing is way more than just reading. Right? Like often you're going to have to launch this software somewhere. You're going to have to run it. You're going to see how it does in production. You have to point and click on things. And as the barrier and the cost of code generation races, down to zero and to being almost no barrier to that cycle, we need to really go and invest on what is the validation platform. Right. So you mentioned Agent HQ, you mentioned a couple of the launches there with Claude and Codex alongside Copilot on the code generation front. That's all great. Now we have to really focus on what about Copilot code review and how do we create this validation platform and systems where we can also work with third parties and with other people in the industry to help validate all this code and all these products that we're generating there. If you can create that virtuous circle where you've got low cost generation and low cost verification and validation, your iteration cycle and evolution loops just become insanely fast. Right, like if you think about evolutionary theory as mutations happening, and then you have to figure out that was a mutation positive or negative, and then we have to go back. Does it die off or does it go and procreate? Imagine that at insane speeds because the cost of creation and verification go way down. Right, like that's kind of the world that we're racing towards today, and you see a lot of folks talking about how do we do code review when I've got, I can spend a weekend and run a whole bunch of GPUs and all of a sudden I have a 95,000 line PR to review. Like, how do I do that? How do I actually test products? The interesting thing is the core technology is actually good at that too. We just, for some reasons happen to focus on that first step, that inner loop, right? The code generation. But the same tech is also pretty good at testing, at verification, at validating, at looking at logs, at reviewing and finding anomalies and alerting humans to those. So I'm optimistic about what we can build in that space too. But absolutely something that we have to invest in increasingly more in the coming year here.
Wonderful. Luis, you just mentioned the word inner loop. I start really hearing that a lot, inner loop, outer loop, in the agent context. Can you enlighten our audience, for those who may not be so familiar with the terminology here, what do those really mean?
Yeah, so I don't actually know the etymology behind it, but the way I think of it is like, look, inner loop. From the viewpoint of the developer, inner loop is like in my head, and the outer loop is the stuff that's outside of my head, right? So as I'm a developer, I'm creating code, I'm debugging it, I'm iterating on that code. That's kind of my inner loop. But then I go to production. This outer loop is like, okay, now I want to watch the logs. I want to see how it's running in production, like outside of that inner development phase. But I think the most interesting thing, like, I don't know how long that distinction is going to last in this new world, right? Why do I say that? Like, I think for the same reason that we're seeing a lot of changes in disciplines. For example, like what is the engineering discipline and product discipline and design discipline when folks that are good in these can now start expanding and stretching into these others through the use of agents. Right? You mentioned you just recently started coding with Copilot CLI again. I did my first check-in at the Copilot CLI over the winter break, over the holidays a couple of months ago. I've been coding beforehand, but I've been managing for so long that it's not a common day-to-day thing now. And we've got people across the board doing this. There's product leads that are now writing proof of concepts and specs and design specs written through agents, or engineers that are writing PRDs when necessary, or going straight from, instead of going through a design, going straight through a proof of concept, right? So I think in the same way that these disciplines boundaries are getting blurred and going more towards this full stack builder, right? Like we had way back that full stack engineer thing that was interesting for a while. Now it's full stack builder end to end. And I think you're going to have a similar thing, in a similar way. You're going to see the blurring of this boundary between inner loop and outer loop, right? The same models that I'm creating or similar should leverage what it's learning creations, those sessions should be interrogated in production when weird things happen in the logs, right? Like think about this world where you've generated this model, right? You generated the code. You've got models that have gone and looked at that session and creation and have interrogated it in the code review to see if that makes sense, debugged it, fixed issues or whatnot. Then you get deployed into production, and maybe you have a model watching your logs and finding anomalies. And when something happens, instead of waking you up at 3 a.m. because you went past 5% of some log entry without knowing if it actually matters or not, that actually stops and goes and interrogates the models that created and that code reviewed and said, hey, Like, does this matter? Right? Like, do we have a new build? Like, is there a DevOps model that knows, did I deploy a new build to production, or SRE model? Is there one that's looking at the logs? And then can they work together and really only wake me up at 3 a.m. if there's seriously something that I need to worry about and have to go and resolve on?
Yeah. Well, we're certainly going back to the early point. We're living in the very fast-moving time where a week is a long, long time, and a lot can change. Whatever is the best practice today isn't necessarily a best practice a month from now. So we'll see all the essence of this conversation, how long that can hold. Thank you for sharing that. With that, let's roll the video showing really how SonarQube and Copilot can work together in the inner loop or outer loop. That certainly looks like an easy button to me with that beautiful integrations where you can detect issues and have a Copilot agent fixing those issues. But I'm sure there's a lot more we can do together. Our engineers can put their minds and work together to build the user experience that really rising to solve the challenges that our users are facing today. At this summit, the theme is the trust and the verification. We see Sonar playing a crucial role of verifying the agent output in this agent ecosystem. What do you look forward most to the collaborations that GitHub Copilot and Sonar can forge, and the integrations, all the upcoming integrations we can do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's co-creating that future. Right? Like, I think there's a huge amount of opportunity ahead, a lot of challenges too. It's with change comes uncertainty. With uncertainty, it could cause a lot of anxiety on people, right? But I think the one thing that we've been good at over and over as a human race is overcoming adversity and doing that by coming together. And I think that's the piece that really excites me of the future. I think personally, I'd be a lot less motivated if it was just me alone working on something, or even just like my company working on something. I like the idea of the industry coming together and figuring out like how, as a tech industry, can we collaborate, right, to build these systems with this new technology and help increase the chances towards that utopian future where, like, hey, we've actually been able to advance progress of the human race through software development. Right, like that's what I want to be working towards, and I want to be working towards that with great people, intelligence and hardworking folks across the industry to create that better future for the next generations. I have a 10-year-old kid who loves technology, and a lot of us do too. And at some point, we're no longer going to be working in whatever company we're in today, but we want to leave behind a legacy. And that legacy is going to be so much more powerful if it's built through a community, a group of companies, people, network, all striving for that ultimate common goal.
Thank you. Wonderful. Really appreciate your partnership and joining the Sonar Summit and sharing your great insight. And I look forward to more coming collaborations with you. With that, onward.
Absolutely. Great to talk to you, Harry.
Thank you.